Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Abby Davis, and today we will be reading chapter 17. Now, I am going to warn you all that this chapter will be involving gender identity and gender switching. So, if you do not like these topics, if you get triggered or they're a sensitive topic for you, please go to this timestamp displayed on the screen to get a brief summary of what is happening. If you did not catch the last chapter, link is in the description to catch up. But if you're all good to go, we will continue on with chapter 17, Horrific Switch.
You want to pick a bone with me? Now you're just asking for it. Satan called out aggressively. I should have known he was going to eavesdrop on the conversation between Abby and I. However, that only added to my anger level that I already developed. It was one thing to be violent to me, but this was an innocent human being who didn't do anything wrong. My head was flooding with obscene thoughts of wanting to beat him for what he did. However, I knew the only way I could make him feel pain at this point was with my words. First things first, you don't have the right to hurt this girl. She did nothing to you. And second, what the hell is with this collar around my neck? I yelled. It's my way of proving a point so your foolish mind can understand. What point? I wasn't in your office when she spoke to you. I have no clue what she said, but that isn't a good reason to chastise me for her actions. Didn't you say that you could tell the difference between her and I? Upon asking my questions, Abby stared at me with wide eyes while holding her stomach. I could tell she was surprised that I was mouthing off to the devil himself. But something within me made me want to scold him. Everything that happened just sent me off the edge of tranquility. I had no filter, which wasn't good, but I was focused on getting affirmative answers. There was silence filling the room again, but I knew he was still eavesdropping. You know, if you would just talk to me about what's happening, we wouldn't...
Darius,
Abby said, intruding on my sentence. I gazed down at her with an aggravated look. However, I stayed quiet and allowed her to talk somewhat.
I know I shouldn't intervene, but you should not.
Abby, I'm going to ask you this kindly. Shut up. Stand there and stay out of this, please. I said in the head while pointing my index finger towards her. After that, she took her hand and moved it across her lips, figuratively zipping them shut. She was complying to my command, and tilted her head to the ground to show her surrender. I nodded back in thanks, and continued interacting with Satan. Why can't these tricks cease? You're only displaying yourself as an instigator of ruin. Stop being a cowardly swine and face me to fix what you started. If you think all I've done is play tricks, then you're really not gonna like this one. After he said that, I felt a sudden rush of heat throughout my body. My breathing began to rapidly pick up as the hotness gradually intensified. Along with that, pain started developing within my back. It didn't take very long for it to spread and make its way forward to my stomach and hips. With everything that was suddenly happening, my body became overwhelmed with agony. These components continuously increased, and I couldn't help but groan in anguish. Eventually, though, the torment of this pain became too much for me to handle standing up. My knees buckled, making me crash to the carpeted floor.
Darius?
Abby said, frightened. I didn't even gaze at her to acknowledge her concern. My brain couldn't wrap around the sudden pain I was experiencing. My back, hips, and stomach didn't just act up on their own. This was something Satan was doing, and I was fully aware of it. The pain just lingered in its place and wouldn't subside. The only thing I could do was stay crumpled on the floor as my physical punishment continued. However, he imagined things differently than me.
You don't get to scrunch on the floor for support. Sit up.
He ordered. I didn't move as the pain was forcing me to freeze in place. My body continued to groan as everything proceeded, when randomly my arms straightened themselves and locked in place to hold up the rest of my body. "You bastard!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't have time to say anything else, for after the name calling, I felt a fierce rush of heat again while the pain shifted more to my spine and sides. I didn't know what he was doing or if something was happening to me. The waves of affliction pressed on while my head appeared hyper-focused on the pain. My body forced my eyes shut as I began to feel the individual discs within my back shifting. Along with that, my sides felt a pair of hands were clamping around me as enormous pressure sunk into them. Ultimately, after a few seconds, the clamping sensation moved downward along my body until it reached my hips. Once the pressure released, my back straightened as the discs in my spine snapped back in place. As the pain subsided, the unknowing heat stayed filling every inch of my body. However, I quickly noted that the fabric of my shirt felt different. Yet I didn't have time to find out why before Satan spoke again.
Now for the worst part. For you, anyway.
"What are you talking about? What are you doing to me?" I shouted, still breathing quickly. He didn't give me time to catch my breath before another heat wave initiated along with more striking pain. This time, though, it formed within my chest. The horrendous sensation became so unbearable again that my eyes closed tightly. No light was permitted to shine through as my eyelids scrunched together. It was the only thing I could do, as Satan controlled the rest of my body somehow. Yet my mind wasn't reflecting upon that. It was thinking about my pecs. As embarrassing as this sounds, my nipples began to feel like they were being pulled and pinched. While that very uncomfortable scenario took place, an unknown miraculous pressure was building within my muscle tissue. As it magnified, I felt my chest stretching and becoming heavier by the second. It was like my pecs were ultimately expanding and were about to tear my skin open from the amount of growth. My arms began shaking from the sudden weight while my body strived to hold itself up. Then, out of the blue, a mysterious object was forming underneath my shirt. It wrapped around the top of my shoulders and fastened under my shoulder blades. Afterwards, the pain and heat subsided yet again, and I took the chance to open my eyes. Once my vision became clear, it didn't take me long to figure out why Satan said that was the worst part. For the sight I perceived was a full pair of female breasts attached to my body. I was stuck flabbergasted as my brain flooded with questions. How was this even possible? Did Satan really have the power to manipulate other demons and their features? Is that why I looked so different compared to everyone else? Was he lying to me about the characteristics I obtained after signing his contract? Although those were questions I wanted answered, there was a bigger dilemma to deal with. I was a man who suddenly grew a pair of breasts. As the idea petrified me, a worse conclusion popped into my head. If the pain I was enduring made these lumps of flesh, More profound changes were about to be made by the power of Satan. The harsh reality was being put into perspective. From just observing this drastic alteration, I found out Satan's plan. His most abominable punishment was going to be changing me from a man to a woman. My breathing began to pick up rapidly upon my realization. As the panic began to kick in, I quickly sat myself up into a kneeling position. Glancing down at myself, I saw the style and design of my shirt had been altered. The color was still red, but the sleeves draped down, forming bell sleeves. Black lace was displayed and sewn into the red fabric to display a sexual appearance. My eyes widened, taking in the sight, and Satan began to antagonize.
Oh, you're not done yet.
Upon his command, I was abruptly thrown backwards. My back ended up hitting Abby's dresser as my legs extended outward from underneath me. I sharply gazed back at Abby to see that she was mortified. Her hand was covering her mouth while the other grabbed the edge of her desk. Her body was shaking slightly as her eyes continued to pierce at me as we made visual contact. Yet I couldn't tell who was more frightened at this point, her or I.
Maybe this will make you think before you decide to talk to me like that again.
After his remark, my left arm and hand uncontrollably swung up towards my face, grabbing a hold of my sunglasses. Then in one swift motion, the glasses were thrown across the room and smacked against the wall. I gasped at the uncontrollable action and spoke aloud. Okay, I get your point. I won't talk to you like that again. Now stop this!
No.
And another heat wave commenced as the pain was sent to my head and face.
It's too late for that now.
My head began to act up and hurt as I felt it being crushed. With my face, there were tingles spreading all along the surface of my lips and eyelids. Then the overwhelming pain began to form around the base of my horns. Frightened out of my mind, I brought my hand up to my forehead to realize my horns were growing into a completely different pair. My brain didn't have time to process the change before they began to shift to the sides of my head. As torturous as it was, I tried to silence my screaming, to not pierce Abby's ears. It wasn't very successful, to say the least. Once the horns were in place, my hair started to lengthen and extend. I seen the strands grow and fill my peripheral vision as they thickened and dangled from my scalp. At that moment, my emotions were exposing themselves as I truly started to panic for the first time in a long time. Because of the episode I was having, I frantically tried to get to my feet. I had trouble stabilizing myself because of the new amount of weight distributed across my body. Nevertheless, I managed to balance myself using the guinea pig cage on Abby's dresser. As I glanced at my human, she continued to stand in her spot, traumatized and unable to speak. Her face of terror struck sorrow upon my heart. She was just an innocent bystander in all of this, and she couldn't even do anything to help. All I wanted to do was shield her eyes from everything that was occurring. However, I just stood dumbfounded. All I could think about was how I was changing and felt different. So at the moment, I quickly decided to maneuver myself towards the door mirror. Gazing upon the reflection, I saw someone completely different. For the visual displayed was of a tall succubus that wore a red V-neck lace shirt with black leather pants. The female version of myself was suddenly staring at me in terror. I was having a hard time comprehending the sight as Satan somehow continued on with my brutal punishment.
And now, for the final touches.
Then one final time, I felt the burning wave of heat spread to every inch of my body, and I forced my eyes to stay open. I tilted my head up to the mirror to see myself shrinking. My hand began decreasing in size, and I lifted both of my arms to display them in front of me. Gazing upon them, they became slimmer compared to my normal arms. Watching with horror struck, I lifted my head again to gaze at myself in the mirror. Just in the nick of time, I saw my entire body reduce in height and width. When the shrinking came to a stop, I took note that I had diminished to about half of what I was, maybe even more. But that didn't matter. There was nothing left of me I could recognize. I was staring at someone foreign and unpleasing. My breathing became shallow as I couldn't take in the sight anymore. So I turned myself away to lean against the wall nearest to me. I couldn't believe anything at this point. My voice of reason was deeply twisted and thrown off by this entire situation. My understanding of the demon world and how it worked corrupted from what I was experiencing. This was an absolute nightmare. How was I supposed to live like this? This wasn't who I was or who I wanted to be. I never wanted this life to begin with, or become tangled up with the evil sentient humans believed in. I didn't want the mountains on my chest, or the long black hair that was irritating the back of my neck. This was the absolute worst day of my life, and I didn't know how long it was going to last. Yet all I could do was feel confused and out of place.
Oh, there is one more thing.
Satan teased. I quickly looked around the room and tried to interrupt him. What else could there possibly... And I felt a brief sharp pain just under my waist area. It was as if I was punched and I was left stunned. In reaction, I placed my hands upon the area of pain and I realized what happened. I used to have the part that defined me as a man. The very essence that differentiated males and females apart within the stereotypical human society. And now, it was taken away within an instant. The genitalia that used to be mine was gone and replaced by another.
There. Perfect.
Satan said with satisfaction. Everything was finished. The horrific switch was complete, and I was left frozen. My brain was sending me signals telling me something was wrong, and kept misfiring. I stood against the wall, trembling, horrified, and fully a woman.
Now that fun is over, I have to go and attend to my other duties in hell. So I'll leave you and your protector child be. Have fun with your new body.
After his statement, he devilishly laughed as his voice faded away. Now, it was just Abby and I in the room. Awkward silence filled the air as I didn't even want to face her. How was I supposed to explain this to her if I couldn't understand it myself? Not only did I have to worry about that, but I had to keep my emotions in check. I exposed them too much already and didn't need Abby freaking out more because of my feelings spilling out. I wasn't happy about the situation at all and felt extremely uncomfortable about my body. I was supposed to be a man. Now all of a sudden, I was stripped of that and forced to be a gender I wasn't. With this body, I felt my emotions spiral out of control. I didn't want to show Abby my vulnerability, but I couldn't conceal it no matter how hard I tried. After a moment, I gathered the courage to turn my head to her. I observed that she was breathing quickly just as I was. Her eyes were as wide as they could go while she brought her hand down from her mouth. She hesitated briefly, making only stuttering noises. Yet after a few seconds, she started to voice her reaction.
Oh my God.
She said, pausing in between each word. All I could do was shake my head because I was at a loss for words. I knew Satan had the most powerful dark magic, but this was beyond ordinary demon power that I somewhat knew. He was allowed complete and utter control over anything that was demonic. And that was the horrible truth that came out of this. Nothing is impossible for him to do. I continued standing baffled and distraught as I was trying to think. How was I, a forever 35-year-old male, unanticipatedly transformed into the opposite gender within a span of 3 minutes? Within the doctoral perspective, it was physically impossible. No man or woman could physically alter their features a full 100% without any medical checkups or procedures. Even for the transgender population, it was impossible. Upon that branch of thought, I recalled how I had patients that were categorized within that group within my human life. I was always curious about their cognitive mindset, but I never bluntly asked them about it. I didn't want to sound weird or aggravate anyone. I knew for some the topic was difficult to discuss, but the curiosity always lingered in the back of my mind. Based on what people willingly told me, their brain constantly reminded them of their body displacement. Now I fully understood what that meant. As my thoughts were spiraling out of control, I heard the floor creak to the left of me. I turned my head to the noise and found Abby advancing towards me. She was clearly aghast upon the sight of me as I shifted myself to straighten my posture. Upon doing so, I felt the smooth leather pants as my hands brushed my legs, while my upper arms rubbed against the sides of my breasts. I flinched and stiffened again from the unfamiliar sensations my body felt from adjusting. Again, another wave of thoughts filled my head telling me how I wasn't supposed to be like this. Nothing about this was accurate with my true identity, and now I was stuck being uncomfortable with myself. As Abby faced me, I could see that I was still taller than her, but only by about an inch. Even though it was somewhat nice to not be the freakishly tall outcast, I was still scared out of my mind. Besides the point, my protector child only stood a few feet away from me and began to fully examine my changes. I watched as her eyes skimmed over every inch of my body. I could tell she was trying very hard not to freak out and ask questions. But I knew she was desperate for answers. To be frank, if I were in her position, I would want to ask too. Unfortunately, though, I wasn't her, and I was the unfamiliar succubus standing in the room.
Darius?
She spoke aloud, obtaining my attention.
Are you okay? Does it look like I'm okay?
I asked back, snipping at her a bit. Upon my response, I heard my voice had changed as well. My eyes widened and I gasped as I brought my hand to my throat. In disbelief, I tried to clear it of any potential mucus that could have built up, causing the weird pitch. However, the voice stayed the same. As I came upon the realization, my body began to hyperventilate and panic. I didn't understand why I couldn't control my feelings. They were somehow spilling out of me like a rumor being spread, and I hated it. I suddenly became an emotional wreck. While I was having my little episode, Abby stepped closer to me and placed her hands on my arms to hold my body still. I ended up gazing back into her eyes and attempted to speak.
I, I, I'm a woman. I know. I can see that, and I'm sorry. I just don't know how to help you. You can't, and I don't expect you to. You're only a human.
Once I admitted that, we both stood silent for a brief moment. My head was trying desperately to comprehend everything, but I couldn't. This was unexplainable. How was this a punishment that the devil just thinks of on the spot? I have never seen this happen in all of my years of being a demon, though. However, that doesn't mean that he hasn't done something like this before. Yet I was still unsure of that answer. I don't think I want to find out.
I guess for now, I welcome you to the world of being a woman?
She said questionably as she shrugged her shoulders. I began to grow furious at that sentence. It was like she was trying to make me accept the unfathomable idea of this transformation. How was I supposed to welcome these new developments? How is a male supposed to accept his role as the opposite sex? Placing her sentence within a different scenario, it was like telling a transgender to accept their body that they were given at birth. So, I quickly jerked my arms out of her grasp in frustration.
How dare you say that? I will not accept that sentence coming out of your mouth. Why would you even say that?
I scolded. Abby whisked her arms back in shock and responded with,
I don't know. I didn't know what else to say. How else am I supposed to respond to this circumstance?
The answer to that was there was no reply anyone could give that would justify this metamorphosis. However, possibly trying to make a man accept an involuntary role as a woman sure wasn't the proper thing to say. As I was lost in thought, Abby decided to speak again.
I know this isn't a good time to say this, but I do want to thank you for coming down to hell and saving me from Satan's wrath. Are you kidding me right now?
I responded, frustrated.
Yeah, now isn't the time to be thanking me. I am not appreciating the result of it. I have a bigger problem occurring at this moment. The niceties aren't going to change anything or improve my mood. I know. I'm sorry,
She said, concluding the conversation. As it ended, I decided to touch my hair and examine myself more. I gently guided and noted that my horns curled themselves like a ram horn. I also came to the realization that flowers were surrounding the base of each of them. Upon that, I started hating myself even more. Not just because I was now the opposite sex. I somehow felt even more insecure about myself than before. And another thing, I didn't know what color or texture these horns had because of their change in position. I normally took in those kinds of details about myself. I was even looking in the mirror when the final change happened. However, I couldn't even recognize my face because of these feminine characteristics. That's probably why I didn't take in any other details. My eyes were hyper-focused on the female that appeared instead of the male. Still breathing in shock, I suddenly started hearing muffled music within the room and called out.
What is that noise?
Reacting to it, Abby's eyes widened as she started squirming for her pocket. She ended up pulling out her phone, and I could hear the music volume and clarity increase. I recognized it as the theme song of a certain dinosaur movie that she loved and realized she was getting a phone call. She mumbled a swear word as she read something upon the screen. Despite her reaction, though, she clicked the answer button and started talking on her phone. As she was occupied, I decided to encounter the mirror again to examine the monstrosity I changed into. Starting where I was earlier, the flowers at the base of my horns were red roses, while the horns themselves were black with tints of magenta within the creases. My hair was at shoulder length, which would explain why my neck kept getting irritated and itchy. Moving my eyes to examine my face, I saw makeup had been placed within 3 different areas. I first saw black and purple eyeshadows were blended together to form some sort of smoky eye look. Because of the brightness of the colors, it made my long, distended eyelashes pop out. The next thing was dark pink blush that shimmered in the lights as it shone upon my cheeks. This combined with my normal skin tone made me look like I was blushing when I really wasn't. The final place of makeup was on my lips, as they now appeared a little shiny with dark red lipstick. Finishing my observations, I advanced my gaze lower to the base of my neck. Upon viewing it, I still saw the collar that Satan gave me when Abby was in my body. That leather choker with the protruding spikes and pentagram dangling in the middle like a charm. My body was starting to grow furious as my eyes stared upon it, and I decided to quickly move on before my emotions spiraled out of control again. Next for me to glance at was my breasts that were bulging out clear as day. Without moving the shirt, I could see the cleavage where each lump met and clashed with each other. My chest was deeply exposed because of the wide V-neck that made me feel even more uncomfortable with myself. Foolishly, I ended up bringing my hands up to touch them. However, my senses were obstructed by some sort of firm padding. I grew relieved a little by the obstruction, but yet confused by what it was. So taking in a deep breath, I moved the shirt to reveal a red lacy push-up bra that held the breast in place. Coming to that realization, I quickly put the shirt back to keep it hidden. The final analysis I took in was my outfit as a whole. I already saw the red and black lace shirt and black leather pants. However, I didn't see how form-fitting the clothes were to me. The shirt was extremely slim to where I could see the drastic hourglass figure of my body. The stature and structure was like a girl's play doll. The leather pants, of course, suctioned to me, exposing every curve I had. Except when I looked, everything had a little more weight to it. My hips, thighs, and ass were now fuller than before. With those changes, it gave me good-looking curves that I believed to be in the wrong places. After that examination, I appeared at my face again in disbelief. No matter how hard I tried, my brain couldn't wrap around anything involving this. I could only distinguish 2 features of me that remained. My eyes and my mentality. Everything else about this was foreign. I mean, I knew the anatomy of a woman and how they functioned, but I didn't know anything else. I was a man trapped in a woman's body, literally. And with that thought, another question came to my mind. How long was this going to last? Before I could truly ponder that question, I heard Abby say goodbye and hang up the phone. I quickly turned myself towards her and started up the conversation between us.
Who was that?
I asked.
Scarlet?
She answered.
And what does she want? Well, she reminded me about something.
She then paused for a second and made my worries rise again.
You remember that rescheduled friend meetup that we planned a little while back? Yeah, what about it? She reminded me that it was today and that we are meeting up in an hour. What? I continued staring at Darius as he was starting to touch his reformed horns. I saw the shock displayed on his face. I felt awful. I couldn't even imagine being in his place. This whole situation was bizarre, and I was forced to witness it. From the whole transforming process to the aftermath of it. I was just an innocent bystander who could only observe another being suffering. I knew that I couldn't do anything to help him. But somehow that was the worst part of this. I mean, I am over here having sympathy for a demon. A literal creation of Satan who became fortunate to deal with his schemes and tricks. Yet with Darius, I couldn't help but have pity fill my heart. What is that noise? Darius said, interrupting my reflections. As I listened for a few seconds, I realized it was my phone ringing within my pocket. As it sounded, I quickly scurried to get it out to see who the hell was calling me at a time like this. However, when I pulled it out, it was someone I had to talk to. For the caller ID displayed read the name of my friend Scarlet. Knowing I had no choice, I answered the call and put the phone to my ear. Hello? I said, trying to act happy.
Hey, Abby. I was just calling to make sure that you were still coming to the friend meetup today.
Oh, that's today? I asked.
Yes, it's today.
She said, a little snobby.
I can't believe you forgot already. We are meeting up in an hour at the Golden Rose.
Oh, well, I'm glad you called me an hour beforehand. Thank you for the reminder, I said, swinging my voice. The truth was that I totally did forget about it. We planned this earlier this month, and it didn't even cross my mind. And now the whole demon-changing thing with Darius on top of it didn't help either.
Yeah, no problem. Abby, did I catch you at a bad time?
She asked, concerned. No, not at all. Everything is perfectly fine. I spoke, looking towards Darius as he was looking at himself in the mirror. I'm just in cosplay because I forgot about the meetup. I'm sorry.
You're fine, Abby. Then I'll see you at the restaurant then, okay?
Yep, you betcha. I'll be there. I am gonna get ready and head out then. See you soon.
Bye.
And with that, I pulled the phone away and hung up. Now I was truly in a pickle. I had to tell the gender-bent demon that I had to go out with my friends while he was having his own gender issues. This wasn't the perfect time to venture out, but I couldn't cancel on them again. Darius said so himself that I couldn't cancel everything all the time because of the demonic things that happened between us. Also, I already canceled the first meetup because of the switching issues we were having. I had no choice but to go to the friend meetup. Who was that? he said, turning back to me. Scarlet? I answered back.
And what does she want?
Well, she reminded me about something. I paused for a second, forcing myself to gain the confidence to tell him the news. You remember that rescheduled friend meetup that we planned a little while back?
Yeah, what about it?
She reminded me that it was today and that we are meeting up in an hour.
What?
He exclaimed.
There is no damn way I am going outside this house like this. You are canceling this meetup right now.
I can't cancel this meetup again. Not 2 times in a row. I am sorry, but you're gonna have to live with that for the time being. At that sentence, I knew I screwed up a little bit. Darius became furious and started to shout at me, literally.
How am I supposed to live like this? I am not a woman and I never will be, no matter what he makes me look like. So while you're out and about having fun with your friends, I am just stuck feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable with myself?
I understand that, and I'm sorry. But maybe you can think about it like being in my body. When we switch, you technically transform from male to female. It hasn't bothered you before when you're in my body.
But that is still choice. I can leave your body when I want to if I ever feel uncomfortable. This is my own body, my own being. I had the choice of being a male, and I wasn't forced into the female role, and now I am. And another side fact, just because I don't vocalize that I'm uncomfortable in your body doesn't mean that I am.
At that point, I just lifted my hands and started taking off my glasses and wig. I was frustrated at my demon being a hypocrite. Yet, I understood his situation. But the fact still remained. I had to stick to my plan, no matter how much he protested. So before unbuttoning my shirt, I turned back to him with a blank stare. Turn around, please, I asked nicely. He did as I requested, even though he was still upset at me. And with his decency, I changed into my normal clothes and got out of cosplay. Once I was dressed and proper, he turned back to me and started talking again.
I cannot go out in the world like this, Abby. Are you kidding me? You're really gonna force me to walk around in a form that isn't really mine?
Darius, I know you're not comfortable with the idea and you don't want to do this. I don't want to either. However, I can't cancel this meetup because of canceling it the first time. I'm sorry. Once again, after my response, I saw him growing angry again. Now, if I noticed one thing about his condition, besides the female part of it, it was the drastic changing of his emotions. I couldn't understand why he kept fluctuating between angry and scared. Hell, this was the most emotion I have ever seen him express in front of me. I get that this was an extremely tough situation, but even I wasn't this fluctuant with my emotions. But regardless of everything, he still managed to vocalize his anger towards me.
Why? Just why? You must have really ticked him off with whatever you did. Wait, I bet this is happening because of you. If you would have just taken my advice and have not gotten involved, none of this would be happening.
I started to fill with anger myself as he was blaming me for this incident. However, I wanted him to know my opinion. Don't go blaming me for your transformation. You're the one who talked him off. I was trying to warn and stop you, if I recall correctly.
Why do you think I interrupted you? As I was attempting to intervene, you stopped me and told me to shut up. You chose to mouth off and started this with him. I wasn't trying to start anything with him. I was telling him the truth and trying to justify myself for your actions. If you wouldn't have made him mad in hell, you never would have gotten beaten by him.
We both stared at each other with aggravation for a moment. But then he asked a question to make me think.
What did you say to him while you were alone in hell?
I began reflecting on the question and I tried to remember when Satan started getting aggressive. He seemed angry from the very first moment I appeared. With only experiencing the interaction personally for a little bit, I could feel the contentious tension between Darius and him. I obviously understood why Darius had his feelings towards him, but I couldn't understand it the other way around. I thought Satan would take pleasure in his suffering and anger. Despite the stereotype, he just seemed to be annoyed whenever he saw Darius. Even though it was difficult, I did remember that I told him he didn't own my demon. That was the moment where things kind of escalated. So I gently started replying to my female demon, hopefully for the time being. I mean, he was upset from the start. He asked if you wanted to kill me or protect me, and I told him you were going to protect me. From there, he grew angrier. However, it went really downhill once when I told him that he should stop riding your ass and that he didn't own you. At that moment, Darius grew shocked once more, but still kept his fury.
That's why! No wonder he grew physically violent! I told you on the second day of us being together that he did! The deal that I made with him claimed me like a piece of property! I can never be free from this nightmare! Don't you remember that pentagram burnt on my chest?
Darius, stop, I said, finally having enough. I understand that this is a horrible situation, and I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. But I can't do anything about it, and I can't cancel this meetup. We have to try and move forward. Let's just be glad that no one else can see you. Only I can see you in that form. As I calmed myself down, I could see Darius relax a little after my response. I was sure he was still confused and agitated, but at least I could relieve some of his worries based off of his last statement.
At least you're right about one thing, I guess.
Soon after, he leaned himself up against the guinea pig cage that was placed on my dresser. I could see him trying to breathe deeply and focus on composing himself. So I left him be and let the silence fill the air again. After about a minute passed in quiescence, I heard a knock at my door.
Abby, sweetheart, are you dressed? I want to talk to you.
My mom called from outside the door.
Yep.
All good. Come in, Mom. I called back, accepting her request. Looking to the left of me, I saw Darius roll his eyes as she entered. I could see that he looked extremely annoyed. However, I didn't care. I figured he could be a pouty boy, or technically girl for now, while I conversated with my mother. As Mom walked in, she started to speak.
Hey, honey, I was wondering if you could...
And she stopped mid-sentence. She turned her head right to Darius, and her eyes widened as her face grew shocked.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had a friend over. Where are my manners?
Glancing at Darius, I saw he was visibly shaken by what was happening. But so was I. How is she seeing Darius? No one has been able to notice him before this interaction. Yet suddenly now it was like a switch flipped. As we both grew panicked, my mom noted our expressions and spoke upon them.
Well, you don't need to be scared. I was just surprised. Abby hasn't had a friend over or even interacted with one for over a month. It makes me so happy. What's your name, sweetheart?
My protector demon started stuttering a little, but answered her question quickly.
Oh, my name is Darla.
Upon hearing his female name, my mom smiled and started asking more questions for me to answer.
Well, honey, where did you meet Darla? I don't remember ever hearing about you hanging out with her before. Is she a new friend?
At that moment, I had to think of a lie and quick as much as I didn't want to. I had to deceive her about this whole situation. So I tried to tell her a half-truth to make myself feel less guilty. I met Darla a little over a month ago before the abuse accident. She's going to my college to obtain her degree in nursing. I bumped into her in the hall one day at school and became friends with her since. Despite that, she has kept me from sinking further into my shell once everything with Chad happened. Mom expressed a huge smile on her face as she continued to reply.
That's awesome! Now, to get back on topic, I wanted to ask if you could go to the store and grab some butter. We have enough for dinner tonight, however, we will need some for tomorrow's meal. I overheard your phone call with Scarlett and figured you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, of course. I'll swing by on my way home and pick it up. Anything else?
No, that's it. If there is, I'll text you. I love you very much. Have fun and drive safe, especially if you have Darla in the car.
I will, Mom. I love you too. As she was leaving, she turned herself to Darius a final time and told him that she welcomed him into our house at any point in any time and thanked him for being my friend. He nodded to her with a fake smile, and with that, my mom exited the room, closing the door.
I just wanted to say that you are welcome anytime in our house, and thank you so much for being Abby's friend. It truly is a pleasure to meet you.
Her mom said, giving me compliments. I didn't want to talk again, so I just nodded, accepting her words. Once I did, she turned herself around and left the room, closing the door behind her. I rotated myself back to Abby and finally allowed my true emotions to show. Abby's mom was somehow able to see me. And the worst part of it was that she saw me as a woman. Not even the right version of myself. But why could she suddenly see me? I couldn't have the ability to expose myself to the human world. I never did. With this entire scenario, my nightmare was turning into a tragedy.
How in the actual fuck?
I tried saying, but Abby interrupted me with a shush. I stopped immediately and followed her instructions. I kept myself quiet as I seen the panic on her face rise as well.
If she can hear and see you now, these walls are thin. She will be able to hear you from outside the door. Remember, she heard the conversation between Scarlett and I.
As she explained, I took note of everything and swallowed the rest of my yell. I still wanted to voice my opinion on the matter, so I chose to whisper for the rest of the conversation like she did.
How can she see me? This should be impossible.
Well, clearly not if it's happening. Why are you asking me about this? I am not an expert. You would know better than me.
I have never been in this position before. I only became a protector demon a month ago. I don't know.
I turned my head back to the door, remembering the encounter we had from her mom. As the memory flooded in, an important question popped in my head and made me panic even more.
Wait a minute.
I remarked, gaining Abby's attention.
If your mother can see me, does that mean everyone else can? Am I visible to the human world?
Abby paused for a moment to think of her answer. I reflected on if that was the case, the meetup seriously couldn't happen. Abby would be forced to cancel and wouldn't try to test fate. After a moment, though, she spoke.
I'm going to assume that people will see you as a woman, but without showing your horns or skin. You're a normal female human. If she would have truly seen your demon form, she would have flipped her lid. So you obviously look like a human to others.
I don't care if she could see the horns or skin. Regardless, she could see me, and we now have to cancel the fucking meetup. We are not going to be able to pull this off.
I stated, figuring she was going to agree. However, something completely different came out of her mouth.
What do you mean we can't pull this off? We just did. Did she find out that you were a demon? No, we made up a story for you, and now we have to see it through. You are going to school for nursing at the same college as me. None of my friends go there, so they don't know it's a lie. And if they ask where you came from and where you went to school, we can just tell them that you came from up north. However, you moved because your dad had a better job opportunity down here.
But I don't want to lie. I don't want to deceive people about who I am. I am a fucking man. A demon.
Lying was one of my biggest pet peeves. Honesty was always the best policy in my book. I mean, I had to be honest because I was a doctor. Besides that, though, when it came to my ordinary life outside of work, I was still honest. No matter how bad something was, it's always better to tell the truth than to try and cover it up with a lie. That was the way I was taught, and that is the way I liked it. If I had to lie about what was happening, it would go against my morals and ethics. Plus, I have done that for 13 years straight because of me being the deal maker. I did not want to hop on that train again.
Do you think I enjoy lying to my mom about you? Because I sure as hell don't. I don't like lying to anyone about you. I don't like how I have to keep this all a secret. Lying is a disgusting action, and I hate doing it just as much as you probably do. However, if this is what we have to do in order to keep you concealed, that is what we are going to do.
If you didn't like lying as much as I do, you would cancel the damn meetup. Doesn't it terrify you that people can see me? Because it terrifies the crap out of me.
I understand that, Darius, and yes, it scares me. The point is still that I am not canceling the meetup, no matter how much you beg or plead. If I cancel, more questions are going to be raised, and suspicion will consume my friends. This meetup has to happen.
After that, Abby grabbed her phone to look at the time. She gazed at it for a split second and set it back into her pocket.
Now we only have a half an hour to get there. We have to leave now.
Abby then started leaning downward and began gathering her hair. I could see a hair tie wrapped around the base of her fingers and figured she was putting her hair up in a bun. While she was doing that, I still brought up my concerns to her.
How am I supposed to pull this off? I don't know how to act like a girl. How am I supposed to walk around knowing I have parts that stick out and bounce all over the place?
I asked, gesturing to my chest and butt. She then straightened herself back up after tying her hair and responded.
Just follow my lead. You don't need to act super curly. If you do as I do, you will be fine. And yes, I get your body and clothing doesn't help you in this situation. You are gonna have to deal with it for the afternoon. You'll be okay. It's just like you acting as Jekyll, except your role is to act like a female character. We will go, have lunch, and come straight home afterwards. I don't want to put you through more torture than what you have to. I promise it will be okay.
At that moment, she grabbed my left arm with her hand. I gazed at it for a second, but lifted my head to look at her in the face. She genuinely looked worried, but also assuring at the same time. Once she had my full attention, she lifted her hand to me, displaying her pinky to speak again.
I pinky promise that we will come straight home afterwards, and I will try to not make this torturous.
I contemplated for a bit on if I wanted to make that pinky promise or not. I knew this was going to be awful no matter what. However, I did like the part about coming home right after lunch. I didn't want to be out in public for an extended period of time, especially like this. So with that, I lifted my right hand to hers and sealed the promise.
You better not break it.
I said with a stern voice.
I won't. Now let's go.
She said, ending the conversation. After that, she started to head to the door and placed her hand on the handle. I began to step forward to follow when my ankle wobbled and caused me to lose my footing. I began to fall forward unknowingly, but was abruptly caught by Abby before I could reach the ground. My eyes quickly gazed up at her in shock as I started to feel my face getting warm. Not to mention that my breasts were now smushed on her, and that alone embarrassed the hell out of me.
Are you okay?
She asked, holding me still. I nodded at her, traumatized in response.
It's okay, Darius. I'm not going to tell anyone. You don't need to blush.
And with that, she started lifting me back up to stand. After I was finally stabled on my feet, I touched my palm to my cheek and felt the warmth from blushing. Blushing! I didn't even know how to do that. It must have happened all by itself without me knowing.
Darius? I think I know why you're having trouble walking.
She said, pointing to my feet. I moved my gaze downward to see what Abby was referencing and took a sharp intake of breath. While bringing my foot outward and twisting it, I found that I was wearing open-toed high heels. But not just any type of high heel. They were black stiletto heels with thin straps wrapping around my foot and ankle. I remember my wife wearing shoes of this style when we went on our dates, and that's the only reason why I knew that. Once I understood her clarification, I gazed back up to her to see her speak again.
I know this makes things more difficult, but just take it slow.
I briefly decided that it was going to be better to try and take her advice instead of whining about it some more. I was being forced to do this no matter what I said or did to try and change her mind. So defeatedly, I nodded my head and followed her out the door. As we walked, we passed her mom sitting in the living room, and she wished us well and to be safe. She still didn't freak out by seeing me, which meant Abby's idea of me appearing as a female human had to be true somehow. Then, after the slight interaction, we started to make our way into the basement by using the stairs. As I was advancing myself, I could feel the bounce of my chest and bottom as I walked. I tried to close my eyes tight to think about something else, but all I could focus on were the sensations and how exposed I felt. Nevertheless, I eventually made it down the stairs and outside before I asked a final question to Abby.
So where are we going anyway?
It's a restaurant called the Golden Rose. It's a bar and grill kind of place.
And with that response, we got into her car and started driving to the city in silence.
This has been Chapter 17, Horrific Switch, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune into the next video for Chapter 18. Thank you for listening.